Executive and the Regional Council is the administrating body of the Mayoral Forum. I will open and chair this meeting until the chairperson is appointed. Can we please start with the karakia? Tēnā koe, Ruben. Can I remind members that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting and archived for a period of 3 years. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to members, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. If there is an emergency and we need to evacuate the building, we will exit via the front door in the foyer and meet across the road. Please follow instructions from staff. I would like to highlight that the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum is now a formal joint committee with terms of reference. This is a change from the informal status of the previous Mayoral Forum. This will be considered in more detail in item 5.2. I have received apologies from Mayor John Fennell and Chief Executive Julie Gardine from Taupo District Council. Are there any other apologies? Can I have a mover and seconder to accept the apologies for Mayor John Fennell and Chief Executive Julie Gardine? Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Tanui. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Denia. All those in favour say aye. The motion is carried. There are no items not on the agenda. There is no change to the order of business. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? There are none. The minutes of the Mayoral Forum on the 3rd of July are in your agenda. Can I have a mover and seconder to confirm the Mayoral minutes of the 3rd of July are a true and correct record? Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Tapsell. Would it be possible to have one of the members who was there at the 3rd of July? Thank you, Mayor Drysdale. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, say aye. I declare the motion carried. Move on to the reports and 5.1, appointment of chairperson and deputy chairperson for the 2025 to 2028 triennium. There is a correction to the report. Paragraph 1.1 states that the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum was an informal forum, and this is incorrect, and the report should read, until the 2025-28 triennium, the Mayoral Forum was an informal forum established under the triennial agreement, but it was not a joint committee established under the Local Government Act or other legislation. And previously, as a collaborative leadership group, it did not exercise formal delegated authority. However, the new terms of reference establishes the Mayoral Forum as a joint committee of partner councils with delegated authority and the voting systems under Clause 25, Schedule 7 of the Local Government Act. And this applies to the appointment of the chairperson and the deputy chairperson. Before I call for nominations for chairperson, we need to resolve which system to use to elect these positions, either System A or System B. And I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report, noting the correction to paragraph 1.1, and choose System B in electing the chairperson and deputy chairperson. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Drysdale. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Tanui. All those in favour say aye. The motion is carried. I will now explain the nomination process. I will call for nominations and need a nominator and a seconder for each nomination. If there is more than one nomination received, each nominee will have a chance to speak to the meeting before a vote is taken. Voting for election for both positions will be done by a show of hands. The person with the highest number of votes will be declared the winner. If only one nomination is received, then that person is appointed. Nominations for the chairperson. Is there a nominator for the position of chair of the Mayoral Forum? Thank you, Mayor Moore.
Epsil from Rotorua.
And is there a seconder? Thank you, Mayor Drysdale. Are there any other nominations? There being none, I will put the motion that Mayor Tapsell is appointed as the chairperson of the Mayoral Forum for the 25-28 triennium. All those in favour say aye. It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Tēnā koutou katoa. Tuatahi he mihi ki a koutou. Tēnā honore ki te noho ki tēnei turu. Mō etahi tau anake. First of all, just wanted to acknowledge everyone. It's a real honour to sit at this seat for 1 year. And then I hope that by the end of this year, I would also like to share the love and see some other leadership coming through as well. But having chaired this Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum last term as well, it's a pleasure to do so as well. So thank you very much. So now we come to the time where we will nominate the deputy chair. We will follow the same process for the appointment of the deputy chair. And so I'd now like to call for nominations for the deputy chairperson, and I need a nominator and a seconder for that. I'd like to recommend Mayor Nandor Tant Josh. Do I have a seconder? That's seconded by Mayor Tunui. Any further discussion or nominations? There appear to be none. Congratulations, Mayor Tant Josh. You are officially our deputy chair, and will appreciate your support, and also, of course, the political wisdom that you bring from other seats that you've sat on as well. So thank you very much. So I declare that motion carried and also congratulate you. So the first item that we have today, actually, before I carry on, just a reminder to everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and it's fantastic. Recorded, and it will be uploaded after. And it's fantastic to have our local democracy reporter with us as well, Matthew, who's here. Kia ora. So our first item, we will go to page 19 of our agenda. We have the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2025-2028, Terms of Reference and Protocol for RMA Policy and Plans. I will ask Fiona to speak to this report before, actually, I'll first of all ask that we receive the report. I should probably do that, right?
You can do that later.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Okay. I'd like. Okay. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a standard procedural option at every time you have a mayoral form and triennial. What is different is the terms of reference, which I've previously alluded to, and also the RMA protocols. They are staying as they are now, but we do expect those to change when the new planning legislation comes into effect in July. Happy to take any questions, or Namuta Potasi can also answer questions. She's been leading this with your staff across the bay.
Drysdale?
Yes, so thank you for this. I guess the question is around this. Was a whole lot happening with going on within reorganisation of local government and RMA reform, as you've just referred to. Our council is very keen to, I guess, supporting this now, but reviewing in 6 months' time. We have a resolution to that effect. Just wondering whether that would be supported or possible from a executive level.
Yes,
That's right.
absolutely. We can add that to the work program if that is the wish of the mayoral forum. So
Any further comment from staff?
Through the chair, at the time that the legislation changes, probably a good time to reconsider. We aren't yet clear from this government. Certainly they have signalled middle of the year, but then we've heard it could be later or later. So that perhaps may be a good time to review.
Good direction, thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll note that as well. Is there any further discussion on this or any questions? Me Tunui?
Thank you through the chair. Look, not so much a question, but really just acknowledging the times of uncertainty and that we work as best as we can with the guidance within the timeframes that have at least been indicated. Now we get an indication that that might be further drawn out or pushed back a little bit further. We do the best we can, and just a show of support and encouragement to our staff who are being informed from various teams within government, just to try and actually not only inform this table, but furthermore through to all the communities that we represent. So it's just a show of support and reiterating the times of uncertainty when we're trying to provide certainty, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that appropriate wisdom as well. Okay. There appears to be no further questions. I will just briefly read out the recommendations before us, then ask for a mover and a seconder. That we receive the report Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2025-2028, Terms of Reference and Protocol for RMA Policy Plans. Note that the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2025-2028 and Attachment 1 was endorsed and signed by all Bay of Plenty local government councils separately at their meetings in December through to February. Notes that the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Terms of Reference and Attachment 2 was endorsed by the majority of Bay of Plenty local government councils separately at their meetings in February, and note that the proposed approach by councils and the Department of Internal Affairs to roll over the existing protocol for Bay of Plenty RMA policy and plans in Attachment 3 with any necessary updates to be made to the RMA planning protocol or process once the resource management reforms have been confirmed and are in force. Do I have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations? That's moved by Mayor Tunui, seconded by Mayor Tantjosh. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to shared services in Bay of Plenty. This report has been prepared by Stace, so I'll also ask him to present to this. And this is on page 52 to 64 of your agenda.
Thank you, Chair Tatzel. I'll take the report as read, but I'll just highlight a few key points. there are a number of shared service and procurement outcomes that have been delivered within the region. Some of those through BOPLAS, which is a CCO established by shareholder councils of the Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Gisborne. But also some of those have been established just through collaboration amongst councils themselves. So for example, Bay of Plenty Regional Council provides IT support for Portuguese District Council. I think it's a great opportunity to platform. It's an awesome platform to look at future opportunities in this space. And there has been some early thought and discussions around what some of those activities could be to explore. For example, waste management, roading, they are high cost activities, and considering shared service options or structures for those types of activities may result in cost savings. Other options could be combined building consent authorities. This has also been supported recently by central government, trying to enable and change the structure to make it easier for regional BCAs to be established. Not so high cost, but there are other benefits potentially through those types of shared service structures, such as improving resilience of the service, improving capability and capacity of staff who are working in the system, and ultimately providing potentially a better customer experience. Other things to consider have been corporate functions such as IT, rates collection, debt collection, and even governance and regulatory services, predominantly around resource consents, and even animal control. So there is a wide range of possibilities. I think one of the key factors to consider is what are the objectives and sort of articulating what the objectives are. So when considering potential candidates to proceed through a structured process, initially determining how they would achieve the objectives would be a good starting point to prioritise. There is a number of barriers that have been experienced in terms of standing up shared services in the past. One of those in particular is cost. There is an upfront cost usually to standing up an option, not only to go to implementation, but exploring the option, developing business case, etc. And history and research shows that sometimes that can be a barrier to progressing with shared service options. However, there is a heightened focus on shared services at the moment, particularly in light with the reform agenda from central government and the announcement of simplifying local government. There is an opportunity potentially if the forum wishes us to proceed and explore certain shared service opportunities that may set us up well for if the government proceeds with the provision of regional reorganisation plans, that we might be able to utilise that information to help feed into that process. Another thing to note is that through that simplifying local government announcement was the central government's undertaking a rapid review of regional council functions, and the outcome of that might be helpful to inform what potential shared service options could be for the region and whether or not they're delivered locally, regionally, or even nationally. So happy to take any questions, and I'm sure myself and my fellow CEs will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much for covering that report, Stacey. Open for questions now. Perhaps I'll just start. You did mention that there's support from government. It appears the government's main focus has been on cost, but as we know, and you've mentioned resilience and capability and capacity of staff, and for us, ultimately providing the best customer service. Do you think that the weightings of those other areas of efficiencies or better delivery through shared service should be equally considered in whatever decisions we make moving forward? The focus of a lot of our conversations has been on cost efficiencies, not necessarily the realities of delivering that and the wider benefits socially, environmentally, etc.
Good question. And I think there'll be a multi-criteria approach that would need to be considered, because there may be benefits in one area, but they may sacrifice in other areas. So, for example, if there was a larger delivery model for waste, what happens to local service providers? How is that established? How is that retained through the process? So there will be a number of considerations that would need to be stepped through. I think it would be smart to develop a multi-criteria approach and put some weightings against those and what key criteria. And one of those will definitely be cost savings and efficiencies, service provision. But there may be an element of local preference, for example, that some councils may wish to retain.
Thank you. Yeah, multi-criteria approach is probably what I was trying to think of. Thank you. We've got a comment from CE Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I hope you don't stick around in that chair too long because we do need you back in Rotorua as well. Can I just add to the kōrero from Stace, and I'm sure if other CEs have perspectives on this, they'll be shared. I think there are two probably fundamental questions we want to answer. I think we need direction on if we're going to progress this. The first one is, what are our objectives? What are we trying to achieve? And a multi-criteria analysis will help us with that. And relative weightings can be part of that question. The second is, what's the time horizon within which you want to see results? Because the number of services that we would realistically be able to move the needle on any of those criteria will change depending on the time horizon you take. So the opportunities over 1 year to make savings will be very different to if you take a 10-year view or a 20-year view. So I think that would help us to move this discussion forward if the Mayoral Forum wants us to, is to identify those criteria. What are we assessing it against? And then what's the time frame we're using to assess those benefits? Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Drysdale.
Yes, I think you make some really good points. Thank you, Andrew. And I think that's absolutely what we should be discussing, is especially around those objectives. And if we're going to do a analysis, then you need some criteria to do that analysis around. I guess I just wonder if the chair would allow some artistic license, that we have a wider conversation around this table of actually the functions that we do at local government, and give a little bit of steer as to where they feel they should be delivered at a local, sub-regional, regional or national level, because I think that does put us in a bit of it gives us a little bit of a start as to what the scope of functions we're actually talking here. So I'd propose that we have that conversation, maybe get a whiteboard out if there's one, and maybe we go through some of the major functions, just so I think it does inform this conversation, but that would be a suggestion, and happy to take any views.
Thank you. We'll certainly keep that on the table for discussion. Medenia?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a fundamental question about how far are we aiming to go, because Mayor Drysdale's point is essentially preempting the CTB, that kind of discussion, whereas I don't think we should be in the space of effectively doing what Botblas is doing, and little bits of tiny contracts, photocopying here and that kind, and mapping there. That's kind of itty bitty stuff that isn't going to move the needle. So there's a more fundamental question about how, are we doing major shared services, or are we doing just Botblas plus? I don't think we're time to get the whiteboard out today, but broadly support where Mayor Drysdale's coming from.
Thank you. And I do note the report that we have in front of us is very detailed at a local level, but there is a discussion required across the district regionally, and then potentially seeing what comes out of the national reforms too. We'll go to Mayor Moore.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. The mixed messaging from government on, it's mixed messaging we're getting. And, you know, local water's done well isn't going to be subject to, rate rangings, rate capping. So it's not just about cost, it's about delivering stuff. So if we look at the recent comments about animal control, particularly dogs, that's something we can work together with right now. It's pointless in us as councils all doing our own piece of work on this. We need more tools for our councils to actually prosecute people. We need more support from the police. These are things we can do right now. So it's delivering those things that we need to do right now. We also save money in the meantime. So that can go towards the long-term goal of ticking off some of the boxes and building up a picture long-term what we can do. So yeah, there's things we can do right now, I'm sure. So I like the idea of the whiteboard. Going through it.
Any further comments or questions? Me too, Nui.
Thank you through the chair. Look, I'm just mindful, Chair, since the local body elections in 2025, we are at month 5. And for all but Tauranga City, for every other TLA, we've gone through a program of induction. In my council particularly, we have a majority of new councillors where we actually had to really have a look at what it is that we are doing and why are we doing it. Reviewing rather than being business as usual and, dare I say, blindly just carrying on and doing what we're doing, that we had to induct new elected members that our community beautifully brought to our table so that we had some clarity about what we're doing. We're also now at month 3 since the simplifying local government announcements were made by central government. And I would like to see that this discussion, we've always been in support of where it makes sense. Let's work better together across the rohe to deliver these services in the service of our people, while protecting our taiao in ways that we possibly haven't in the past, at a higher level of consideration of the effects that that has on our taiao. So intergenerationally, we leave something better behind for the next generation of leaders that will sit at this fine table, Your Worship. I completely actually support the whakaaro of sitting down together and having a look across our rohe where we have areas of commonality in terms of delivery, and it makes sense to do that better. Let's do that. I also believe that we are perhaps, Chair, victims of our humility in the fact that the tables that have been presented from Boplas, if it makes sense to do it, we've just gone ahead and done it, but actually haven't lifted that up and given visibility for our communities to see, look, we were doing it like this before. Now we're actually joining up and partnering in this way to be able to make sure that there's backup services or whatever it might be. So the humble kumara really needs to we just need to say, I believe, Chair, would like to make it very clear, this is not a knee-jerk reaction, however, to the announcements made around simplifying local government, but would like to see that this is just the way that we do things because it makes sense and it improves service delivery while being mindful of the costs associated with that delivery for our rohe, really just encouraging that. I'll bring a whiteboard pen, Your Worship, happy to do that. I think it's a great idea, thank you, and support that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
At the whiteboard.
Any further questions or comments at this stage? Mayor Tant, Josh?
Thank you. And I'm really aware that kind of as a new mayor, I'm probably not quite, I'm still getting clear in my own head about where the opportunities are. I think the idea of a multi-criteria analysis is right because I think sometimes we can over-egg cost savings in these kinds of things. And I think about some of the work we're doing in our council where we're improving efficiency, but it's not necessarily leading to direct cost savings in the way of kind of reduced staff numbers and things like that. It's actually just that our people who are snowed under are able to get a little bit more done on their to-do list. So I think kind of thinking about cost and efficiency and other criteria, I think is a really important thing. I support the idea of a bit of a brainstorm around it, and I think, so one of the things that's come up is animal control. I think in our district where we've actually devolved animal control into some of our communities and really hyper localized it, which again I don't think has led necessarily to cost savings, but what it has lent to is much safer communities, because we have dog rangers who know the dogs and know the families they belong to, and have a very localized knowledge, which sending people out from Whakatane, they don't have. So again, I guess it's not just cost, but also what are the social outcomes and the community outcomes that we get. And the other thing is, I wonder if in the process of doing this work, we might identify places, and I wouldn't think we should do too much work on this, but places where actually some of the best savings to be made are at a national level, and it comes back to a point that Mayor Mahe made as well. And maybe that's something we can indicate and kind of put through to LGNZ for further work, because they're probably, for some things that we're looking at, actually it's at the national level where some potential big cost savings are to be made.
Thank you. And we will be hosting the Local Government New Zealand conference in our region in Rotorua in the last week of July as well. So certainly topical. What I'm hearing is there is a desire to have this conversation. There is a desire for perhaps some urgency on it. Our chief executives will all be meeting tomorrow. So what I suggest is, and I'm open to what you guys think about this, what I suggest is perhaps we'll continue through the agenda, but then at the end, in the section where it's items not on the agenda, we just come together, consider what some of the key functions are that we may wish RCs to start on, and then they can best utilise their time tomorrow. Do appreciate we're not in a position to make any decisions, but we're certainly here to give a direction. And fortunately, with the session already booked tomorrow, hopefully they can get a head start on that. I do note that in the agenda it is very detailed, but specifically I think we're seeking, are there better ways of serving our communities, cost efficiency and other criteria. Does it sound good? And then it gives us a chance to consider what we may wish to speak about at the end of the agenda. Okay, well, we'll carry on with that. There appears to be no further questions or discussions, so I will just put the recommendation receives the report, shared services Bay of Plenty region, and notes that a list of potential shared services initiatives will be presented to a future mayoral forum. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Mayor Tunui, seconded by Mayor Moore. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. That is carried. I think we'll go on to one more presentation. We'll take the regional spatial planning, and then we may break for morning tea at that stage. So it's my pleasure to welcome Namuta to come up and present. And we are on page 76 of our agenda. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, your worships, and the chair. As the chair has mentioned, I am Namuta Potasi, General Manager, Strategy and Science for Toimoana Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and with me I have Adele Hadfield, who is our Strategy and Planning Manager. We have a presentation for you today. We are seeking your direction on regional spatial planning. So as the chair has mentioned, we're on page 76 of your agendas. So most of you will be aware, as part of the new system, part of the new framework, there is a requirement for each region to have a regional spatial plan. And that regional spatial plan is your 30-year strategic framework to direct urban growth development, infrastructure investment and land use decisions. So in terms of what we're going to be covering off today, we're going to talk through once we work out the buttons, we're going to talk through the why readiness matters. So the why of it, the proposed approach, which really does build on all of the fantastic sub-regional spatial planning that's gone on across this region. And then we are going to cover off the what, so how we are proposing to get ready for change. So in terms of readiness and why readiness matters, Sorry, it's not. Okay. So in terms of why readiness matters, I was trying to think of an analogy of a story, whether that's a sport team or something. So I've come up with one. I'm not sure it's very good, but imagine we have a cyclone. We've got a cyclone coming towards us and it is going to land. It's going to land either somewhere around mid-year to sort of September this year. It's going to hit all of New Zealand at the same time. We are proposing that we are ready, that we are clear on what our information base is. We have a very strong information base here, but there are some critical gaps that we need to look to fill. We want to be clear on how we work together, the joint councils, the joint teams, who does what in this response. It's coming, we know it's coming. How do we get ready for that? We also want to be really clear on what is important locally, as well as on key processes. So we know legislation is going to change. We know that's happening later this year. We want to be in the best possible position to be able to respond to that. We want to have all our ducks in a row, if you like. The timing is really tight. You would have seen in the draft legislation, once it is enacted, we will have 15 months. So we don't want to necessarily spend that 15 months in organising who's doing what, how we work together, how we plug gaps in our information. We want to be able to respond. So that was my analogy. Not sure it's that great, but it would be looking to build on the work that I've talked about before. You'll all be aware we are very fortunate in this region. We're probably one of 2 regions in New Zealand that are best positioned to quickly develop a regional spatial plan. We've got the Eastern Bay Spatial Plan, we've got the Rotorua Future Development Strategy, we've got the Smart Growth Strategy. So we are in a strong position to move forward. Those strategies were all developed in a different way. They all have different base assumptions. There are gaps within that information. There's a new lens from the central government at the moment. There's the regional piece across the top. So there's some preparation work that is needed to get us into a good space for when legislation comes into effect. We also know that a lot of our partners have been sharing with us that key stakeholders like the infrastructure providers want to know what our plan is for regional spatial planning, and the quicker that we can give them that certainty and clarity around this is our process, the better. So that is the why readiness matters and why readiness matters now, and particularly in relation to getting our evidence sorted, getting our relationships, how we work together sorted, and getting our process sorted. I did just want to recognise and acknowledge all of the work underway at the moment that's going on within your councils, and this is just a snapshot of some of it. In terms of the how we work together, you would have seen this diagram. So we circulate, or hopefully it's not unfamiliar to you, we circulated a form of this diagram as part of the Mayoral Forum information in February. We presented it to the Rotorua Joint Committee recently. It was formed part of the Smart Growth submission on the bills. We have developed this diagram with your teams across all of the councils. And what is key about our proposed approach to regional spatial planning is the acknowledgement, is the recognition of all of the spatial planning work that has happened to date. The current legislation doesn't recognise local spatial planning, and we've noted that as an issue. So what we are seeking today is the endorsement of the collective approach that we have developed, which acknowledges the important work that's happened locally. And so how we are proposing this works is that we've got a team across the council of, at the moment it's sort of GM managers that link together and provide advice to respective councils. That information will filter up to your sub-regional committees. We've got Smart Growth, we've got Eastern Bay Joint Committee, we've got Rotorua Future Development Committee. So before anything comes to the Mayoral Forum, the proposal is that it goes through, clearly your councils, the joint committees, and then comes to the Mayoral Forum. So that's how we are proposing that this approach works. That's our proposal, that the key featuring is the work that we're doing in the with Smart Growth, with the Eastern Bay Joint Committee and Rotorua Lakes, building on the sub-regional spatial plans. And you'll see Taupo is there as well. They have been involved in the development of this document too, but not to the extent that your staff have, just given they've got a little geographic area part of the region.
Are you happy to take questions as we go? Cool. Just got a quick question from Medenia.
Thank you. Namuta, how confident are you that structure there is broadly going to be acceptable for the regional spatial plans? Because I've heard varying things, and there's been some commentary that it'll be quite a prescribed structure, and I don't know, maybe that's not the structure that will be acceptable. Maybe it is. I think that's a useful starting point. It'd be great if we can do that. But how confident are you that that will be the case?
From my perspective, this is about the cyclone coming and us getting ready for it, as opposed to waiting for it to land and then respond, because then we'd only have a short amount of time. We do anticipate that we are going to have some prescription around this. What we have been pushing for is the flexibility to be able to shape our own way forward. Certainly, the discussions that I've been involved in were looking at the ability to have local variability, which would enable regions to determine how they wanted to move forward. Certainly, by having this discussion, and if this is the direction from the Mayoral Forum, that this is our approach, we can use this approach and use this information in any advocacy between now and legislation coming into force. And certainly we've been doing that through our submission and trying to acknowledge the importance of the work that's happening in the sub-regions, because there is such a wealth of data. All of your teams have, spatial planning gurus within them that are doing a lot of fantastic work that we want to make sure is already recognised. We're one of the few councils in New Zealand that are so advanced in our spatial planning work. I don't know, Adele, if you wanted to add anything further to that?
Just one quick addition is that this is the proposed approach up until we get the legislation. So inside that, we expect that what we will bring back is an options paper about how we go through to the post-enactment governance and approach. And that option will include the scale from we've got control over it, we have no control over it. So taking that into account.
A question from Mayor Drysdale?
Yeah. Just a similar sort of question is my understanding is there's going to be sort of standards and a lot of standardization and guidance coming as part of this. I guess my concern is, is any of this work going to be redundant or not necessarily once we find out where we're actually headed? And you've said we're in a good position. So, is there a real benefit in doing more now or waiting for the legislation?
Yep, absolutely. So the work that we're proposing, and on the next slide we'll sort of outline what that looks like, is all no regrets work. So if we take it back to the analogy of the cyclone coming, it is coming irrespective of whether we do something now or not, irrespective of who wears what civil defence emergency management jacket, vest, that work still needs to be done. So irrespective of who does it, there are still gaps that we know need to be filled.
And then just a quick question, because you do mention the inter-regional chapters as required. I think it's fantastic that as a Bay of Plenty across our councils, we're so far advanced compared to the rest of the country. But what does that mean in terms of Waikato, Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay? I'm not sure where they're at. Will that slow down our process? Is there concern that we may need to go even broader than this region, which would naturally be a concern for us and likely be a concern for us in our communities?
So through the chair, that's just recognising the importance of the linkages, and the work that we do is not in isolation and does have direct key linkages to other spaces. In particular, actually it came quite strongly from Rotorua Lakes Council, that interrelationship with the Waikato, the flows of people, the flows of goods, and making sure that we acknowledge and recognise that. Sort of similar what we were anticipating to what's currently in our regional policy statement in terms of the interrelationships chapter, just acknowledging the importance of those interrelationships. We didn't anticipate that it would slow down. Certainly, this has come from staff in terms of just acknowledging the importance of those connections, but it certainly is not anticipated that we will align directly to others' work programs. Yeah.
Thank you very much for addressing that question. Okay, we'll let you carry on with your slides. Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked through the why readiness is important and our proposed approach. What we're going to talk through now is what specifically we're talking about when we're talking about getting ready. So I am going to pass over to Adele, who is just going to take us through to this no regrets period of work between now and whenever enactment occurs of the new legislation.
Thank you. Yeah, so what we know is that most regions across New Zealand are preparing and they are taking different approaches to that. We've tried to, as Namuta said, stay at the no regrets end. Others have gone a lot further. So what we think we can do collectively, with little danger of having to repeat or throw things away, is really looking at the early engagement with iwi partners and key stakeholders. Looking at a program plan, the bills are already relatively prescriptive around the process that you need to follow to complete a regional spatial plan. You need to have a process agreement. The bills are quite prescriptive about what's in the process agreement. It's an agreement about how collectively the TAs and local government work together across the region and with others. What the approach is, as I've already alluded to in the response to Mayor Denia, is that we're expecting to bring options papers and discussion papers through this stage. So there will be no decisions made. The intent is to prepare for decisions post-enactment. So if there are changes, we can make those what we expect, given what our focus will be on, small tweaks to those documents for a spatial plan committee to be formed very quickly in the post-enactment phase and get underway with the actual delivery work. But there will be just a lot of opportunity to talk about how this would best work for the Bay of Plenty region as we shift into those stages. And that's what we're focusing on now. And some of those base assumption pieces that Namuta has spoken about already, which is we're already collectively working across the region on things like population projections and making sure that the direction we get from government actually aligns with where we need to sit as a region and the differences across the region, so that when we go in, we don't have to spend time discussing what population projections we can use. We can talk about some of those things prior. So that's just an example of some of the technical work we can do. We also, again, as Namuta has said, know that even though we've got the sub-regional spatial plans in place at the moment, we will have in the new legislation, it is about enabling growth, and it is about doing that within constraints rather than some of our previous, which is looking at where we want growth to go. So there is a slight shift in philosophy around how these are driven. So one thing we're doing is looking at where there might be risks in our existing sub-regional plans for pressure outside our current growth settlement patterns as well. So those are the sort of things that we can do this side of enactment, no regret, because it will be helpful, we think, given the strong direction from this government about what will happen with the enactment process. And that is basically summed up on this slide.
And just touching on key risks and dependencies. So we've considered a number of different key risks and we outlined key ways to mitigate those. The one I mentioned earlier was in relation to timing and the final form of legislation, which we've talked about, which came through from the question in relation to focusing on no regrets work now and making sure that our work program is flexible. The other one relates to timing to get alignment across councils. As you can imagine, the process that we've outlined where it goes from councils to the 3 joint committees up to the Mayoral Forum means that the Mayoral Forum will have 2 additional meetings before enactment to provide key guidance and direction. So that's 2 rounds of going through council's joint committee, Mayoral Forum, council's joint committee, Mayoral Forum. So it is quite a short time frame. We do acknowledge capacity constraints, so we are collectively working with your teams on developing a more detailed work program for spatial planning, and we are absolutely going to leverage off the work done in smart growth in through the Eastern Bay Joint Committee and through the Rotorua Future Development Strategy. Each of those documents has an implementation action which is about getting ready for spatial planning, so some work is already underway in that space. Of course, we have our commitments in relation to treaty MOUs, which we will make sure that we give effect to as we go through this process, as well as managing those expectations of our key partners. And I mentioned before the infrastructure providers. People are just looking for that certainty. And so if we can provide them certainty in relation to this is our proposed approach for the region in developing a regional spatial plan, that would be useful. And so that very much does sum up. We are keen, and certainly the staff recommendation is that we really get into this preparation stage and that we get ready for building on the fantastic work that we've already done, looking at filling those gaps, looking at how we work together, looking at understanding those key priorities for a region, doing that work so that we are in a really good position for when the legislation comes into effect so that we can move into that next phase together. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Just a question regarding the timing. I note in the report it mentioned a draft stock take report will be ready by mid-March. Is that just almost ready?
Absolutely. So the team have been, Dale, did you want to talk to that one? The team have been working on this for the last few months, linking with all of your organisations to get our data and information together and to look at those gaps.
Just quickly, an example of that is we have in the legislation, there are mandatory matters that must be considered in regional spatial planning. So we've now gone through those mandatory matters and just seen how prepared we are and how consistent that preparation is across the region for us to be able to respond to those mandatory matters in the regional spatial planning. So that's one example of kind of a no regrets approach. We're not sort of opting to look at absolutely everything, but we know that there's clear direction, for example, around things like natural hazards. So we're doing a natural hazards assessment of where we are across the region to be able to respond to that.
Thank you. Mayor Moore?
Got a question, but I'll just comment on through the latest events, State Highway 2 being knocked out. It's caused us significant issues in the Portuguese, but nowhere near the extent of Tairāwhiti. And I looked the latest data, it's looking about $8 million GDP per day that was closed. Just with our spatial plan, we push back against, almost against the direction of Minister Bishop. We're looking at some zone changes. And so what we did was, as a council, was wrote to him, highlighted what we're doing and the reason why. And we pretty much got a letter approving to carry on with that work because the messaging had been stop that work. Rather than just assuming and listening to the messaging, is it worth us actually providing what we've got, what we want to do, just to the minister, just to get some direction, maybe from a Mayoral Forum perspective, rather than just assuming that's what they're messaging us? Is that something we could do?
Through the chair, we can absolutely do that if that's the direction from the Mayoral Forum.
Yes, thank you, Memo. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. No one's opposed to that? No. So I think perhaps what I could do as chair is work with Namuta to draft what that would look like, and then we'll email it out to everyone and get any feedback and then eventually send it through. Thank you. And I think also making the most of us as a region being so far ahead in this as well. Thank you. I've got a question from Deputy Jen.
Thank you, Chair. And just a comment, well, no, it will be a question, but I just looked up spatial plan in terms of the definition of what does that include. And it's a region will develop integrating land use, infrastructure and environmental protection. And I just think going forward, do we have the equivalent desire to have a plan for this region, for the economy, for play and recreation, for social outcomes? Because at the end of the day, your preparedness, are we preparing for the future of rates capping, of an ageing population, of decreasing ability to manage what central government gives? So it's just, for me, the structure's really there for looking much higher in terms of how we work together. This is an amazing forum. So I just would like to put in that, we could make that a different plan, obviously, but that's sort of where we need to head, I would have thought, to all survive better.
So through the chair, absolutely. All of the strategies, the smart growth strategy, the Rotorua Future Development Strategy, the Eastern Bay spatial plan, all of them have that holistic view of not just the economic view. So it would be quite easy to take that perspective and lift that up across the region as opposed to just purely focused on enabling growth. So we can absolutely do that.
Thank you. Any final questions? Me Tunui?
Thank you. I completely support the notion of having a more holistic lens across what we do. That's what I've observed in my 12 short years here in local government, is the government of the day will find something that they're really interested in, and whole communities, whole regions, the entire country of 5 million shifts to whatever the conversation of the day is. I'm a real big fan of having an overarching, with all the considerations, plan. And if we do that comprehensively enough, then actually when growth becomes the meme of the day, the theme of the day, economic growth, housing, if we do that, homelessness, the complete opposite end of housing, if we do that comprehensively enough, then actually, in terms of the terminology of no regrets, Chair, I would never regret doing the work that's needed, having conversations with my community about what's best for the place that we live in. I think I'm hearing that from Deputy Mayor Schooler. The place that we love, living here today, taking the wisdom of yesterday to guide us for tomorrow. I think that's a great idea. We do have a really strong foundation, and we've talked about that for several months around the plans that are already in place. Not a big fan of aligning to standards. I would always say, in terms of no regrets, let's us know what Bay of Plenty is, what we believe, what we're hearing from our people is best for us here now. If it doesn't fit the standards, then there's a suggestion of actually not justifying or validating, but just saying, actually, this is what our people told us is important for us, what's important to protect, what realistically we cannot protect if there is a natural event that just forever changes the environment, and we have to maybe think about things a little bit different. But I actually really holistically support that overarching plan. When I think about, over summer, I had feedback, Chair, about police, about the hospital. For those who were aware, our lovely whānau here in Tauranga Moana received our mamas and our babies while Whakatane Hospital was undergoing some changes and things like that. That's not local government, but they affect and impact the people that call our place home. So I'd support that as well. We might need a bigger whiteboard, Mayor Drysdale. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. C. Stace?
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that's gone on from the teams. And just picking up on Mayor Tunui's comments earlier, it's awesome to celebrate the successes, because, hearing the comments that we're one of the few regions in Aotearoa that have got spatial plans covering the whole bay is a pretty awesome achievement, and hopefully sets us up well to navigate some of the reform. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that point and just congratulate the team for the foresight.
Thank you. Do you want to say something?
Through the chair, it was just in relation to the resolutions, and if you wanted to add a few resolutions in relation to writing to the minister, and also whether you wanted to have a resolution in relation to the holistic regional lens that you were asking us to consider as well, whether you want to consider those additional 2 resolutions.
Personally, I think we could just note it as an action point, and then we get it updated, because all of those are actions that will then come back to the table and or just happen. But thank you. Do appreciate that. And sorry, just finally, I do have a question regarding doing this at a regional level and how we maintain the balance between the priorities at each district level. Just being very aware of any unintended consequences or, yeah. So I'm totally all for this, and I would love to continue to be ahead of the game by being super prepared for, I think, June when the select committee report back, and then halfway through the year when it goes through legislation.
In response, I think in the process agreement, it allows for the conversation to be had around what is considered at a regional level and a local level. So that would be some of the preparation work we would do now across the region, would be these matters more appropriately dealt with locally and should be a matter in that sub-regional part or even in a local part, versus these matters of regional nature, and therefore, and that's the sort of conversation we're suggesting happens now so that we're ready to respond to that after.
Okay. Thank you. And we've got Chair McDonald and then a comment from CE Andrew.
Kia ora staff, I just want to reiterate about the great work that's been done, not just by regional council staff, but council staff across the region. So ngā mihi. The question I wanted to ask is around when do we start to look at engagement with the community? Because what I want to be mindful of, if those communities may have already participated in the development of those sub-regional plans. And I know that a lot of our communities are consultation fatigued. So I'm just, advising to tread with a level of caution when you're going out to consult on this new idea, and just be mindful that many of them would have already gone through the process of organising their own sub-regional plans, and also a lot of them are already sitting in those three spaces that you're there. So that's all I'm saying. But just answering my question, how far away do you think that consultation process will start to kick in?
I think a good example is the work that was done through the Eastern Bay Spatial Plan, where we had a group called the Friends of the Spatial Plan, who were people who were more interested, almost like Namuta was referring to, developers, infrastructure providers, those sorts of things. So rather, we expect that prior to enactment, we will talk to them because they also have a special place in the regional spatial planning process in terms of the legislative requirements. But the general community, absolutely, we are acknowledging that. Again, Eastern Bay is a good example within the last 2 years. And in fact, Rotorua FDS was 3 years, Smart Growth Review 2 years ago. Every community in this region have told us through a regional spatial planning process, through LTP processes, what is important to them. So we do not want to go back out there because I think it is fatiguing and disrespectful. So that's part of the information we are trying to pull in, check back, and that will happen post the enactment phase, that more general engagement, and that will be set, and the tone of that will be set by the Spatial Planning Committee, which will be the governance agency of the delivery of the regional spatial plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And CE Andrew.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess trying to imagine. Obviously, the objective of a spatial plan is not itself; it's to enable the growth of communities over time. So I'm just trying to think about how this plays out, and wondering if doing this at a regional level might, or would it, through this process, have the consequence of saying, well, a local community thinks, and I'll just use an example, we need more industrial land over the next 10 years. But when you aggregate that up to the regional level, would there be a view to say, well, as a region, we've got enough industrial land, so we don't want you to zone land industrially? And I'll just make the point, just to illustrate the point. Is that a possible consequence of this process? And if so, how would that local aspiration be protected? And you made a comment earlier about this is about enabling growth rather than deciding where growth would happen, which in my mind reassures me that scenario I outlined won't be the case. But I wonder if you could talk about whether this process will enable growth everywhere, so which seems aligned to what the government policy direction is, rather than saying, well, actually, we think it should happen there and consequently not somewhere else.
Nemo.
answer that. We had exactly that same thing that you just said happen, and that's why we wrote to the minister involving, we needed zone changes in our own town. So look, we're comfortable where it all landed. We were told there was enough in Whakatane, but we wanted our own as well. So that does happen, but we've actually managed that, and with the help of all of us working together, we've solved that. But that's what we got the heads up from the minister, that he was happy with it.
Well, and absolutely. And just to build on that, the discussions that we're having with all of the council staff are actually really proactive. And in the other space, or we've got too much of that. Do you want some of that? How do we get that going that way, as opposed to the other way around?
Well, it's been a very good discussion. And so we'll close it off there. I will just thank Namuta and Adele, and also echo the thanks from CE Stace to you all. I will just read out the recommendations and then ask for a mover and a seconder. That Bay Plenty Mayoral Forum receives the report Regional Spatial Planning, notes the importance of the foundational no regrets work in 2026 to prepare for short regional spatial plan statutory times, endorses the proposed high-level RSP program, noting further work has been undertaken with staff across councils to develop a more detailed program, endorses the approach of including the role of sub-regional planning within the wider regional framework, notes that several details are yet to be determined and will be revisited post the release of the planning bill expected in mid-2026. That's moved by Chair McDonald, seconded by Mayor Tunui. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. I declare that motion carried. Thank you. Let's break for morning tea. And what I'll suggest is we take 20 minutes for morning tea, and we'll come back at 11:10. Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai hoki mai. Welcome back. Thank you for that break. We are on page 85 of our agenda, and we are going to kick off with the Waikato and Bay of Plenty Cross-Regional Waste Strategy and Waste Infrastructure Project. This is on the agenda at the request of mayors in previous meetings, and it's my pleasure to now hand over for this presentation to Dean Howie, who's the Program Manager of Regional Economic Development at Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Mayors, Deputy Mayors, Chair, Deputy Chair, and CEs. I'm actually filling in today for Valerie Bianchi from Waikato Regional Council, who's the Project Manager. She was invited to present, but unfortunately is an apology today, hence the branding on the slide. Waikato Regional Council is the lead agency for this work, but supported by Bay of Plenty Regional Council and all of the councils across Waikato and Bay of Plenty, and we really appreciate your staff's involvement in that project. So you just quickly flick through. I am going to use Valerie's notes just for consistency with some of the other presentations that she's given in the Waikato as well. I think, so as we all know, waste volumes are increasing due to population growth and urban development, and significant volumes of waste are transported into the Waikato region, particularly as shown in the image on the left there. And that obviously has massive environmental, social, and financial impact for councils and communities as we struggle to manage those increased volumes of waste. So from the work that's been done previously, we know that approximately 60% of waste that is going into landfill from curbside could be diverted from landfill, and 40% of general waste could be diverted from landfill. And we also know that infrastructure planning has been a little bit inconsistent over the past few years, but development of a cohesive waste strategy is identified as better supporting of better waste management. And so a coordinated response is needed to address those issues. This is an image of the Central North Island Waste Liaison Group on one of their site visits. That's a group that's convened by Waikato Regional Council. It involves the waste teams from all of the councils across the Waikato Bay of Plenty, Ruapehu District, Taranaki and Gisborne. They regularly come together to share learnings, education, and arrange site visits, and also contribute to waste strategy development. Was this group, the Waste Liaison Group, that discussed coming together for a cross-regional infrastructure plan and waste strategy in April 2024. Waikato Regional Council then put forward some funding application to MFE for the Waste Minimisation Fund to fund this project, and that was successful. So since then, Waikato Regional Council has engaged a contractor to divide that work and work with all the councils to deliver that as we move forward. Additional funding for this has come from Bay Plenty Regional Council and obviously Waikato Regional Council as well. There's two key components to this work. First deliverable is the cross-regional waste strategy, which is attached to your papers today. And that's just to set out, the background of current situation, what we're facing, and a way forward collectively of how we can move together. Shared direction. The infrastructure plan itself sort of identifies practical solutions and future assets needed across the region. So the strategy has a 30-year roadmap with short, medium, and long-term sort of outcomes. Focus on reducing waste, improving resource recovery, and embedding circular economy practices. It establishes a framework for consistent planning and collaboration and supports future alignment with WMMPs and regional long-term plans. It also creates space for co-design solutions with tangata whenua and local communities. We just included a small piece here on disaster waste, because that's obviously something that's a topical issue at the moment. Just to point out that there are some actions on the waste strategy, years 1 to 3 and 4 to 10 in that space, and your teams have obviously been working very hard recently in response and recovery. So phase 2, which is the infrastructure plan piece, that identifies the infrastructure and systems needed across the region, such as compost hubs, community resource recovery centres, reuse facilities and the like. Planning is going to be based on geographic population areas, not council boundaries per se. So the aims there are to reduce transport emissions and costs, minimise the lock-in of high emission waste systems, and to strengthen regional resilience. You're probably well aware that a circular economy is one where waste is prevented through better design, for example, through better material choices, design for repairability, services and products, and materials in use, keeping materials in use for as long as possible. Some upcoming milestones for the project and next steps. So as I sort of identified, we're focusing on the infrastructure planning piece now. That will also include identifying funding options for implementing the next phase as well. The waste strategy is non-statutory, so adoption pathway may vary between the different councils. We're also aware that local government reforms could affect council capacity and also priorities as we move through this phase. The Ministry for Environment has a stage gate in here just to unlock funding for phase 2. That's the gold bar on the little the slide there. We don't anticipate that's going to be a problem, but we have just identified that as a low risk just in case. And the timing of phase 2 is quite critical because you obviously want to influence and get things into long-term plans for 2027 to 37 if required, so we don't miss that next critical planning phase for councils. In terms of where we are today, we're seeking endorsement for a recommendation from this forum that the constituent councils will endorse the strategy. Just to ensure we, that coordinated cross-regional delivery and aligned future infrastructure planning continues, and adoption of that strategy in early 2026 ensures that that strategy can inform the upcoming long-term plans and WMMPs. And we think it's a major step forward for cross-regional collaboration and long-term waste system transformation, and it positions our regions to reduce waste emissions and environmental harm while strengthening community wellbeing and resilience. Happy to take any questions.
Very much. Question from you, Denia?
Thank you. I think there's some good stuff in there, but it feels like this has been going on for years, and we've not really got to the meat of the issue. I think the infrastructure plan for June, March 27, it will be key. Firstly, when do we as elected members and our communities get any get to input on this? It's good to have that cross regional collaboration, but we basically need at least one landfill in our region, and our district probably needs at least a transfer station. And I think the Mayoral Forum is the ideal vehicle to progress those conversations. But I mean, this is a one step in the process. I get that, but I'd rather see something more substantial sooner.
Thank you, Media. Just acknowledge that. I think as with regards to where different facilities will come into play, that's where it comes as phase 2 in that infrastructure plan. So at the moment, we're developing a long list of options, and a lot of that will come through. There is going to be some community engagement, mainly through community waste groups and the like, council staff, industry players, as part of that sort of engagement progress, iwi as well. In terms of presenting this to elected members, I think really would probably need to come from your own staff to Western Bay and the likes as well. So, but as part of the strategy adoption, this phase 1 piece, we will be asking all the councils to seek approval from their own elected members throughout the process of this phase 2 is underway. So.
At some point, there's going to be a gnarly conversation saying we need a landfill. Where do you want to put it? And everyone will say no, thanks. And there are options, and it's certainly better than trucking it all over the Kaimais into Waikato, and there's issues there now as well. So yeah, I think it would be good, I think, to lead this conversation, and I'd be disappointed if we sort of get a short list come through, and then it's like, well, I didn't have any input to that, or our staff didn't have much input to it, and it doesn't really suit us. Because that's in discussion with Waikato. So yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Moore.
Just a question that's not in this report, but I'm surprised it's not something considered, but waste to energy. And there's a lot of pushback on that, and there's a lot of talk about there's not enough waste. Well, I'll just tie it off at the end. It's not our region, but just for an example, in the last 3 years, they took 600,000 cubic metres of waste wood off their beaches at a cost of $31.4 million. That would have gone a long way towards, setting something up. That product shouldn't end up on the beaches. It should be, it should be taken from the forest. So that could solve us a lot of issues. There's a lot of product going into these landfills, and yes, we are going to need one, and that's going to be a hard conversation for our communities. But we do need one because eventually the ones we send our stuff to are full. Tairawhiti comes through our corridor, heading up there as well. So it's not just us; it's them as well. So is there any thought being put on that, or is it just the waste?
Through the chair, so nothing on waste to energy as such, because obviously with a focus on circular economy and moving to reducing waste and not having that as an end-of-life disposal sort of option. So hence why that didn't come through. With regard to the forestry waste that ends up on beaches, there's potentially an element where that could be used in a biomass capacity, which is, I guess, the energy piece you're talking about, but in a different kind of context rather than using sort of harmful materials in a waste to energy piece. So there's potentially options there, and that is something that we have considered as part of the industry engagement piece. What are the options there around particularly sort of biomass for those sorts of products?
Thank you. Mayor Drysdale?
Thank you. I guess, as sort of brought up, at some point the rubber's going to hit the road, and, assuming the infrastructure piece comes in, there's going to be some infrastructure to build, and I'm guessing there's going to be a go out to the councils and say, can you put your hands in your pockets? So where are people at? Is everyone sort of understanding that is happening and prepared to commit? Because I can see some really good long-term benefits here. Especially if it's centralised and it's using, trying to make it the least kilometres possible to go to a landfill, but also that work around, reusing. But it always comes at a cost, and I'm just trying to get an understanding where councils maybe are at, whether because you do all this work and then everyone says, oh no, not me, it's too expensive, and the whole thing falls over. So that's probably to Mayor Denya's point, but is there some buy-in, and you think there's a real commitment? Is this long term? Is a cheaper option overall because we're doing it together with with those councils rather than having our own strategies?
Through the chair, that's a great question. And yeah, ultimately, things will come to councils and for approval. Hence why getting these options together, shortlisting, and then making sure anything immediate can go into long-term plans this year, but we're potentially talking in the next round, which is 2030 to 2040 long-term plans. There's infrastructure planning work underway, particularly your own council, Rotorua Lakes, I think Marapana Piako as well. So making sure those are already feeding into this bigger piece of the puzzle. I think the key there is to make sure that when we look at it from a regional perspective, a council is not planning to do something where there is going to be something quite close nearby, and there's probably opportunities there to collaborate and share resources. Yeah, you're right, down the track there will be a request, and that will come through the individual councils depending on where those sort of locations are. But as part of this, we are going to do some business cases into where we might try and seek funding for certain things. But yeah, at this stage, it's probably a little bit early to tell where those all land.
But I think this is a really good example of the discussions we had, and really applaud you for the work, because I do encourage it. I think, when we all work together, and this is on a regional plus basis, we can have some significant, better outcomes for our people, as well as hopefully, some cost savings by not being in our little silos. But that's just my message, I guess, to the table is, if we are going to go along with this, we've all got to do it together, and hopefully get better outcomes for the region and another region next to us.
Thank you. Mayor Tantros, followed by Denia.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for this piece of work. I think it's really good. And I agree with Mayor Mahe that this is an area that we do need to work really collaboratively on. You can't solve these kind of issues on your own. Agree with me. Denia's points about, that there's some good work in this, the kind of collaborative piece, but really it's the infrastructure where it's going to get really interesting. We do need to think about landfills, and I'm not a fan at all of waste energy, and but I agree with your point about biomass and that. So landfills is a conversation we've got to have, but the stuff that personally really interests me a lot more is around the other opportunities around circular economies. I'm interested in, and I have a couple of questions, if I may. The first one is around, do you have some thoughts at this stage around where the opportunities are in terms of the infrastructure plan around resource recovery? Because it seems to me that in terms of getting better at it, we need to have clear markets, we need to have processing, and that's the thing we've always lacked as a nation on a nationwide basis. So do you see some immediate things that stand out for you around resource recovery infrastructure for our region?
Through the chair, that's actually this next phase, is we've sort of got this long list of options and resource recovery centres, and are they sort of by waste stream and taking into account what are the end markets. So that's sort of underway at the moment, I guess, is the short answer to that.
Right, okay. I'll just have to be patient. The other question was around disaster waste, which is something that's, I remember when Edgecombe flooded and the huge amount of contaminated waste we had coming out and the difficulty of doing anything with that. Do you have some initial, you said there's some work was being done. Do you have any comments around how we can, are things stating about how we can manage that?
Not specifically at the moment. So obviously with the strategy, you have a work plan and there you've identified some actions. So there's further work to come into that space, but we just sort of noted that as it's obviously quite topical at the moment. So yeah, again, watch the space. But appreciate your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go back to Mayor Denia.
Thank you. Well, I'll answer Mayor Mahi's wero, and I mean, speaking for myself, I haven't checked with the council, but I think we would have that buy-in, because this is something we need to work together on. It's a genuine piece of cross-boundary infrastructure and facility that we'd be more than happy to contribute to, because we need it. And as long as we're working together, so that we don't build one and then Whakaputani builds one sort of 10 k's away from us or something like that. I mean, that's just common sense, right? So, but that conversation will need to be had and about contributions. But I think it's not too difficult an ask because the alternative is that we each build one ourselves and it's hugely more expensive. So, yeah, I think we should be able to get there. Thank you.
Any further questions? No? I do just have a question regarding, it does mention that the infrastructure plan will look at geographic population areas rather than local authority boundaries. I know certainly Rotorua, we've got one of the biggest community groups, Ruparoa, that border two regional councils. So that's, you know, our farming rural area right in the middle of Rotorua and Taupo. But they have eco-gas there where we intend to send our food and organic waste collection there, which will be converted to energy. So great circular economy story. But is that sort of what you're talking about with the geographic population areas, is, you know, not necessarily looking, because like where does the waste get made? How much does it cost to transport it to the hub? Is that what you mean by hubs?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's essentially what it is. So obviously, Tauranga Western Bay, a lot of communities are very close together and just either side of the border. So having a facility, say, for construction and demolition waste located nearby makes more sense than arguably in Kawerau district. If there's a lot of building going on in Tauranga, why would we ship it to Kawerau? Why would we not have it sit a little bit more closer there? So, but equally, things like eco-gas, you know, that's well located. Would you create another version of that that's under economic viability, and that potentially not. So, but it is just taking that lens of where, like you say, where is the waste created? So where is the best place to locate a facility based on what predominant of that waste stream is? So.
And I think, unfortunately, with world events at the moment, the cost of transport and the variableness of that does need to be considered, as well as the emissions that creates. We'll take a comment from CE Andrew.
Thank you, Worship. This probably touches on what I said earlier and possibly the whiteboard session that's coming later. But if we think about, as Mayor Denia said, it's some time before we get the actionable information. In that time, there could be councils sitting around this table or this region that are locking themselves into waste contracts. Waste is one of those contracts that I believe offers quite significant opportunities for improved financial outcomes for our ratepayers because of the cost of it and the fact that there's effectively a duopoly in this country. I just wonder whether, maybe it's an open question, not so much to you, but to the mayors, and chairs, whether there's a direction out of this to say, while we work on that, each council take a really deliberate look at whether any contracts are renewed until we can have a more strategic conversation about what happens. Because this is one of those items that over 1 or 2 years, it's very hard to make any savings because many councils are locked into multi-year contracts. But over 10 or 20 years, you could make really significant savings. And it would be a shame to get a strategy and, actually 2 councils signed a 10-year contract last year. So it's an open question, really. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And we'll certainly, people have heard that and we'll be mindful of that. Okay. Oh, sorry, Mayor Tant, Josh.
I have one other question. Container deposit legislation is an idea that comes and goes and gets a bit of momentum now and then wanes back. But I think probably at some stage we'll get it. Is that being factored into these conversations?
Through the chair, yes. So with the legislative context is something that obviously feeds into this piece. And again, we sort of look at waste volumes as it does wax and wane. You could potentially look at it, but obviously with that view of will it wane again. So all waste streams sort of considered. And I think it's then just a case of what's the low hanging fruit, where you can get the biggest bang for buck.
Well, thank you very much, Dean, and really appreciate you stepping in to not only present but also answer some questions too. Thank you. So I'll put the recommendations now to the table. Receives the report Waikato and Bay of Plenty Cross-Regional Waste Strategy and Waste Infrastructure Project And point 2 endorses the Waikato and Bay of Plenty Cross Regional Waste Strategy. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? That's moved by Mayor Mahe, seconded by Mayor Denia.
Just an addition to reflect what Andrew was saying about the CE's review contracts for that wording, but if CEs were to review contracts so that they're not renewed and long-term contracts are not entered into, which preclude long-term cost savings or something like that.
CEs review future contract commitments and report back.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Jen. Did we get that? Okay. So, and movers happy with that point as well? Yep. Okay. I will put any discussion on the addition. No, I think it reflects the discussion that's been had. It's just reporting back. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you, Dean. We now move to local government reform, the submission Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum to simplifying local government proposal. Well, we actually know quite a bit about this, so I'm just going to open it up to the meeting. Is there anybody that has any comments or any, should it really be questions, but whatever you want on it. And then after that, I'll put it to the floor to receive the report, Local Government Reform Submission, Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum to simplifying local government proposal. There appears to be none. Do appreciate that we are now just waiting for the response from government on that submission, and thank you everyone for the feedback that went into providing it. So I will put that to the floor and ask if there's a mover and a seconder to receive that report. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? That's seconded by Mayor Moore. All those in favour, please say aye. Any against? That's carried. Thank you. And so we now move into the verbal update portion of our agenda. And then following that, we will also open up for the wider whiteboard discussion that Mayor Mahe had brought up. So starting off is, I'll invite Mayor Mahe to cover his point of potential cadence of reorganisation.
Yeah, thank you. And probably been banging on about this. I think the whiteboard session may inform this. You know, I guess with what's happening around the country, there's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of things happening, and you know, the question to the table is, you know, are we prepared to move on this? We have I believe a small opportunity where we can get ahead of what's happening. We could, you know, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Local Government, Chris Bishop, I've heard them all say, we're prepared to look at alternative proposals if you want to get out of our legislative framework around reorganisation, but you have to be organised and you have to move quickly. And if you're prepared to do that, then potentially you won't have to fit within our proposal that, you know, we've put a submission in. We're now waiting for the submission. We'll go through a process to put legislation in, and then we'll have to do it anyway, and we'll be within the guardrails of what the legislation says. So we have an opportunity now, if we're prepared to do something, to act quickly. And I think this will build into the whiteboard discussion we have. And you know, I think New Plymouth District Council have just showed, along with Taranaki Regional Council, have showed what is possible if you're prepared to take the bull by the horns. Within 3 weeks, they've made a decision. They're merging, and they've got a proposal underway that over time they will integrate both those councils. Now, that's a great example of where, you know, they've moved quickly, they're doing something. Ultimately it'll be a better outcome. They've still got their 2 different council functions. They're basically doing a big shared services model, and then they'll restructure themselves to get those efficiencies out of it. So, that shows us what is possible if we are prepared to see some benefit and I guess take a little bit of a leap of faith. But if something is going to happen and we're going to have to reorganize ourselves, and so the discussion really is, are we prepared to do that to ourselves and get out of going through the government's form and control the whole process, or do we want to wait around and do what the government tells us to do? Is probably where it's coming from. For me, just on the conversation earlier, I just see a huge amount of efficiency and effectiveness of doing a lot together. That's why I'm excited about that waste strategy. I think there's lots of opportunity. We do things difficulty, but ultimately, you don't do this unless there's a better outcome for our people. And if you can't deliver that, then you don't do it. And we've heard, I think that's a really good example, Nandor, around what you've done with dog control. So when we do go to this to this whiteboard session, we start talking about the functions. It's really an overall view as where should things potentially be delivered for the most efficiency. It doesn't mean that there's not local groups doing part of that job. And I don't know if those at LGNZ, Simon Upton had some really interesting discussion around different things, and just one of his examples was pest control, and he said, well, actually pests don't recognize local boundaries or catchment areas, so maybe that's something that should be done at a broader level, because you might in your region do a really good job, but if your neighbours aren't, then all the pests are just going to keep coming. So I think those are the opportunities, and I guess the challenge and the conversation had is, are we prepared to be a leader and a first mover and do this? Obviously, how do we do that? That's got to be discussed, but or are we just going to wait around and I guess do as the government tells us to do in the way they want us to do it?
Thank you for putting that challenge on the table. And we just open now if there's any feedback to what Mayor Drysdale has raised. Chair McDonald?
I actually like what Mahe is actually saying. I think it puts us in the driver's seat, and we should keep that space. We're given the opportunity to tell the government what's best for us, and I think I alluded to that at our first meeting. And I think if the opportunity's there, we should seize it. I guess it's about is making hay slowly so that we're bringing everybody along with us as we do this. But I certainly support what Mayor Drysdale is saying. Is that let's see on the whiteboard then how we actually start to do that, because I think it's actually right. We shouldn't give up the opportunity to do that, and we certainly don't want central government coming over the top of us of telling us what's best for the Bay. And I still stick to that. I just think we've just got to rally ourselves quickly to look at how we go down that track.
Thank you. I think just to add to the discussion as well, I'm quite keen for those who are willing and able to start progressing some work. It does frustrate me to have to wait for government reforms, but at the core of all of that, it's what's best for our communities that we serve. And you're very right, Chair McDonald, how do we ensure that they're not only brought along the journey, but that their voices are heard and listened to. And if I can reflect on some of the big changes that we've seen in the past, which kind of is why I get concerned with what's coming up now, is this region has felt the impacts of the health reforms, losing our DHBs and that going to a national entity. We've felt the impacts of the tertiary reforms and the significant way that impacted the smaller communities as well. And so I do come with a nervousness from my council and my community that if change is pushed upon us, that forces us to lose our local voice and our local ownership and power over our own future, then we would be quite concerned. So I believe as Bay of Plenty region, we can work together very strongly, but how do we support one another to do that? I'm really mindful, we've got some districts that have very high populations, and at times we have seen also how the smaller populations have struggled in forums such as regional transport committees to ensure that their districts are still fairly and equitably resourced and supported when balancing higher populations. So I suppose what I'm saying is I don't want to just wait for further mistakes to occur from people outside of the district telling us what to do. I know that Rotorua would be keen, as you are probably all aware. At the end of last term, a notice of motion was put on the table by our council to discuss a unitary authority, which would combine local and regional functions, with the purpose of ensuring that Rotorua's decision-making and potentially assets could stay local. We're still very open-minded on what that could look like as we go through regional reorganisation discussions. But put simply, we do have experience with what happens in these major reforms, and I want to make sure we get it right. So if that means starting these conversations earlier, so we don't have a short time frame to put adequate solutions on the table and inform our community, our iwi partners, then I think it's worth beginning that sooner rather than later. Any other feedback? Mayor Tant, Josh?
Thank you. I've got, a range of comments in response. I think the first thing is that I don't like to be, I don't think we should wait to be dictated by government, because we'll end up with solutions that don't work for us particularly well. So I think having some conversation and exploring options is a good thing. I come into this with a very open mind. I don't have any fixed ideas about outcomes. I know some of us may be coming in with some clear ideas about where we want to end up. I don't have that, so I'm very open to a conversation, and I think we need to think in a very open-minded way so we don't get shoehorned into something that doesn't work for us. I share your concerns, Mayor Tapsell, around the impacts on small communities of any changes, and I think we need to be really mindful of that. And also that any outcomes are really equitable, including any assets that are on the table. We need to make sure that, outcomes are really equitable. And the other thing is, I think I hear the point that if we move swiftly, we can maybe get in front of things and get outside of the framework that the government's setting. And I support that, but I also don't want to hurry so quickly that we end up going down a road that we end up regretting. So I think having the conversations, but being mindful and stepping carefully. We need to bring our communities with us, and we need to be very open-minded about where we might end up.
Thank you very much. Mayor Drysdale?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that you make some really good points. I guess the bit that we need to move quickly in is that this is something we want to do, and the government's timeframes, for example, for the CTBs is 2 years. So I think the final outcome doesn't have to be quick, but the need to move to get outside of the government's framework does. But that would require a commitment from everyone within this region that we're prepared to do it and start that conversation. And you know, because if we didn't get the outcomes, you know, probably in that 2-year period, we're going to end up, you know, probably falling back under the legislation. But yeah, I think there's some really good, you know, really good points you made there. And yeah, I think if you separate out the functions from the form and the representation, I think, you know, that's the key to me, is the representation is going to be the issue that actually represents our local communities, and how do you get that right in a, you know, potentially a restructured organisation, or however that form is, how do you continue that? Because even from our communities, that is what I hear all the time, is people don't want to you know, have one person that, you know, sits 100k away from a region dictating what happens in that region. So, you know, I think we need to separate those two things out, as to how things are delivered, and who's representing you and who's making the decisions as to how they're delivered.
Maybe if I can make a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Drysdale, but there's a representation discussion, which is very, very important. And that's where we have already heard clearly and often from our communities that they want local representation and decision making. But then there's also, you know, the form or the function, where we've just finished having a great conversation on shared services. We hope we can find some efficiencies in a number of different ways. So yeah, it is complex, but in terms of, I suppose, what you're seeking, Mayor Drysdale, are you wanting to know who is ready or willing to discuss this conversation sooner? I'm just mindful, we have consistently always talked about, you know, we've got to stick together with this and be strong as a region. So how do we enable those who may wish to go faster without an unintended consequence of those who are not yet ready? Because we still need conversations with our councils, we still need conversations with our communities.
I think the direction is, you know, are we prepared to jump and get in front of the legislation? And that's a commitment that we will work together to design a reorganisation, you know, over the next couple of years. So that's really the decision now. I think as you say, I think it's very hard if 3 of us said, okay, let's do it, because ultimately that's where the government want the whole regions to have that conversation. So, you know, I think we do need buy-in, and, you know, the default is we'll get reorganised under the legislation. So that's really, to me, that's where the discussion is. Have we got a commitment to doing this ourselves and you know, doing it together, or, you know, do we want to wait until the legislation comes out and do it under that mechanism? Because either way, it's going to happen. So.
Thank you. And if there's anyone else that wishes to share their thoughts, let me know. But I will just note there is no resolution or decision that's coming out of today. This was a verbal update. He's definitely put that on the table. As mentioned, our Cs will be talking tomorrow, but what I would like to suggest is, based on feedback that you may have either today or after, please feel free to email that through. Then at the next meal forum, which could be sooner rather than later if we need it, then we can look at actually, well, what does that look like? What decisions required, and what discussions back with our councils and our communities do we need to do before we commit to the jump? But I'm hearing there is some urgency on that. And do we think we'll hear from them in April? Yeah, we think April we'll know. So not too far away. Any further thoughts on this, Mayor Moore?
Look, I think the wording has changed from being early adopters to moving at pace. We had a lot of it for 3 years prior to this term. Look, and to be a leader, you have to know where you're actually going. We don't know where we're going. If you're going to jump anywhere, especially into a river or wherever, you want to know how deep where you're jumping. We don't know what a unitary's functions are going to be. So I'm not sure what the need for, pace to do this. Be pointless in setting something up that's a waste of time. So when we find out what the functions are, that's when we start moving at pace. Look, and everything, when you're a couple of 100 kilometres, when you're 300 kilometres away from an area that's making decisions for your region, it's not nice. And you have small regions always suffering. Most of probably 80% of my work is actually not council work. It's doing the job for central government because they do such a crap job at some things, police, education, roading. They could learn a few things off territorial authorities on how to do roading. So it's not about not being brave, Mahi. And you would never have started a race if you didn't know where the finish line was. It'd be pointless. So let's find out where the finish line is, find out where the stuff is, and I'll be all in. I don't mind being brave when I have to be, but I've got to know where we're going, and then I've got to bring my community on board. I'm going down to the Wanaka Air Show. Been long overdue. I'm going for a flying in one of the old planes. The thought of trying to get there on an aeroplane in New Zealand or the ferry is quite daunting. So I've booked both, and we're down to one ferry, and there's about 40,000 people going to have their not going to get to their destinations, but blaming the war in the country where. So look, it's there's a lot of issues, and councils get the blame for everything. Actually, I think some of the Prime Minister and a few others actually need to have a hard look in the mirror. Many of these problems are their problems. So bring us on board. Let's find out where we're going, and then I'm happy to jump in and join the race with you, Mahi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Me Tunui.
Thank you through the chair. Look, it would be remiss of me not to mention that historically, small communities suffer with amalgamation. The DDA word previously was asbestos, and now it's moved into amalgamation. It would be remiss of me not to mention that, Chair. Forgive me. There have been several attempts to separate the function from the representation. Let's not dismiss the last 2 hours conversation, team. All we've demonstrated was an appetite and a willingness to explore if we can serve our communities better in other operational arrangements. It doesn't take a genius to say that. Of course, we would explore that. And let it not be led by, let's be really honest about the cycle of elections of this country. I've heard lots of bouquets and accolades about the waste minimisation and the logic of joining up with our whanaunga from the Waikato region. That conversation wasn't started because the now-day local minister decided to launch a simplifying local government. That was started in the previous triennium, where actually Commissioner Tolley, as the chair of Tauranga City, was exploring offering Te Maunga down Truman Lane as potentially a regional resource. That was where that conversation was started. It was not started because simplifying local government and the current minister of the day told us that we had a timeline to meet. That was the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum of the time, recognising that if we can do things better, more efficiently, to look after our arohe and our people, then of course we would explore that, Chair. In terms of the question of, is there buy-in or are we just going to go along with that? We've not demonstrated or I've not observed an unwillingness to, but as Mayor Moore has so beautifully articulated, we just need to know where we're going. Let's honour all the work, please, Chair, that our staff have done. Rather than isolating the simplifying local government, let's grab it all in, because that's all we've been doing for the last 2 hours, for the last number of trienniums, at least the one that I can own from this and previous. We will continue to do that. That is actually the start of the conversation of exploring how we can better partner together as a local government Bay of Plenty whānau to be able to serve our communities well. If there was a question, are we ready? Never a fan of meeting central government timeframes. But let's make sure that we keep at the heart of things. That's why we're here. That's why our people, for those who went through local body elections last year in October, that's why we stood true of heart to serve the Bay of Plenty. If it happens to meet some of the intentions of central government, that's probably more just by sheer luck. Thank you, Chair.
See if Daniel or Chair McDonald has any contribution to this, and then we'll wrap up this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank Failing for that kōrero. I think it's really about seizing the opportunities. And I hear, I've heard the kōrero from both the last two mayors that spoke about we don't know where we're going. I think here's the opportunity, though, to get together to show where we were going. And I know that, and the other thing I think we've got to thank the government for, this is probably the only time I will, is that it's actually brought us together. And we should, and this is probably the greatest opportunity and something I've seen since my whole time in local government, that we've all actually come together in one room. And I think, we can thank the government for that, but we shouldn't pass up the opportunity of that. And, I don't think it'll be a waste of time, even if it doesn't get used, because what it would have done, it would have set our path to actually find a plan that's good for the whole of the Bay of Plenty, with all of you participating in that space. And I think that's the greatest opportunity that we have here. And whether it comes to fruition from this, even if it doesn't come to fruition through this government and there's a change of government, I don't think we should give up from what we've started here to what we want to achieve. We should still maintain the pathway of working together, because I think that's the biggest opportunity that's been given us, and irrespective of what government is sitting at now or in the post-election, we should continue to find a way of what's best for the Bay. So, I know there's a lot of things that we have to work through, and the complexity of how we acknowledge every sub-region and every concerns raised by our mayors in this forum. And we've just got to find a way to work out things. So maybe it is that whiteboard exercise that we need to be looking at, instead of just sitting here and talking. Maybe we need to become more proactive in how we can move. And hopefully, if it's faster than what we're currently doing, and we can achieve those addressing those issues that are coming from each of the sub-regions, which I totally respect, then I reckon let's get on with it. Kia ora.
Thank you.
So a huge amount, but it's often said that form follows function, and we still haven't really got to the bottom of who should be doing what. I think that conversation is coming up. I look forward to having that conversation, and then the form will drop out of that. Whether that comes ahead of the government or not, well, we'll see. But that's if we can get ahead of the curve, then sure. But let's have that conversation first about functions and who does what.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry, me too,
Thank you, Chair. Just a final comment from me. I know time's getting on. People are probably getting hungry. I perhaps would like to table a different view and a different consideration, that it wasn't the government that brought this table together, but the leaders who are sitting here today, Chair. As a former Deputy Mayor for my council, I did observe perhaps some of the disconnected conversations that were happening, but it is the willingness and the appetite and the leadership of those who are sitting here that was started perhaps in the previous triennium and continues in today, Chair, that brought the Bay of Plenty rohe together. We've always been here to serve our Bay of Plenty rohe, but we are mindful that we are but part of a bigger system that have some different drivers and some different timings, and we've heard the pressures from our staff. We have to do it quickly, urgently. This has to be done. We need to write plans, but we don't actually know the standards that we're trying to meet and align with. This is not new for us, but our willingness to come together really comes from this table. So reiterating that for our community, we've always been willing to sit here, and let's not separate the conversations that we've been having. They all lead to this destination, this confirmation of what it is that we're looking for, which is in its basic form, Chair, just to look after our people in place better, more efficiently, collectively, with unity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll want to thank Mayor Drysdale for raising this as an opportunity for us to have that discussion. The only final item on the agenda is a brief update from me on a homelessness strategy. And then there is a whiteboard at the back and a number of chairs down there. And what I recommend is we'll finish off this meeting, close it off, have some lunch, and then we can have the whiteboard session together. I'm mindful some people need to leave early for afternoon meetings, but we'll just note that because the whiteboard's down there, we will just take some notes of the key discussion as per usual, process in our minutes, and share that as well, so that it is also publicly available. But I will just provide a verbal update now on a homelessness strategy, and then as a separate item but connected, also potential for a Mayor's task force for homelessness. So this work has actually been underway for a little while. Unfortunately, as councils, as mayors, we quite often have to deal with and help to manage or mitigate the impacts of homelessness in various forms, whether that's ensuring that there's enough potential for development of affordable housing and housing options, all the way down to having to manage rough sleeping. As you know, in my district, we unfortunately became known around the country as the emergency housing motel district. And I am really pleased that while that is now well and truly in the past, we still have to deal with the impacts of homelessness, and in particular, rough sleeping, either on the streets or in cars as well. So I think there's a real opportunity for us as mayors to independently provide leadership in this space. I don't think that it's served our communities well that the political pendulum swings one way from another over time. And actually, we need not only solutions that are urgent and addressing the urgent need of providing shelter for those who are vulnerable, but also the important role that we play as mayors in planning for and enabling the longer term solutions of everybody being able to have a place to call home. So quick update, first of all, on the homelessness strategy. We have this fantastic person called Peniel. She worked on a homelessness strategy with Tauranga City Council. We were really impressed with her work. We've brought her over and resourced a piece of work where she's helping us with the homelessness strategy. As we were going through that, though, it became quite obvious that, you know, here we are as individual councils trying to solve what's a very complex issue. Why not work alongside each other, other councils at a staff level, which has already been happening and seen fantastic results, but also as a mayor level from a leadership perspective. And what we've found in creating this homelessness strategy is, as mayors, we can bring together the various government agencies, not-for-profits, community services, and bring them all into one room and enable the breakdown of the long-standing barriers of not sharing information and actually get key data and be able to make well-informed decisions on how to prevent this in the long run. So as an example, I really encourage Ministry of Health to come on board, because all the experience of dealing with and managing homelessness, almost always the foundation of that has been a health problem. And then it's truly broken my heart to see how young some of the people are when they first experience homelessness, or the majority of those who are homeless. And I'm talking a cohort of between age 12 to 24. And so what can we do now as mayors to push through not only the change that's needed, but also to help encourage and empower those who do have the mandate and who do have the funding to be able to deliver it. So that homelessness strategy is almost complete, and I will share it with you all when it is, so you can see how we've gone about the process of exactly who's in our community, exactly why did they end up in this position, and what are the gaps that didn't help them when they needed it most, so we can make sure that that's filled in future. So I will openly share that with you as soon as possible. But then that brings me to my final point, which was the proposal for a Mayor's Task Force for Homeless. I'm very open on what this could be called, but as you know, we've got the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, and I thought to myself, many of us has put funding into that, and it is also funded by MSD. Is there not a potential for us across the country to be able to create again a task force where mayors are able to show leadership and not only advocate for those in need, but provide those solutions as mentioned. So just some examples of what that could include is facilitate community solutions, which encourage improved appropriate social infrastructure, access to shelter, sustainable housing outcomes. Certainly supporting the people most at risk and increase their possibilities for future housing. Importantly, engaging with our communities, in particular Māori and Pacifica, with culturally relevant solutions. You know, we often talk about one size doesn't fit all, and that's certainly the case. And then importantly, also identify and prioritise initiatives that reduce and prevent homelessness among young people. And, you know, I've just happened to be in Christchurch with a previous LGZ conference and managed to get the opportunity to see the youth centre just before it opened. And they have a youth shelter in there because these young people don't fit the criteria of what would be emergency housing or motels because they're too young. And so there are already existing solutions, and how do we make sure that we're sharing that information and building strong partnerships, and importantly, encouraging collaboration. So I really just want to know if that is something that mayors and councils are interested in collaborating on. Very open-minded on what it could look like. Again, I'll share the strategy, and what I'll also be suggesting is, as we are hosting the Local Government New Zealand Conference in Rotorua in July, I'd like to put an invite to all councils and perhaps have a specific discussion on that at some stage during or before or after the conference as well. So really, I'm just seeking, is this something that you would be interested in joining so we can collaborate as a region? There's no request for resource on this. It'll just be because we're already funding the development of the homelessness strategy. But if you wish, hopefully it can be a framework for you to then also implement some positive actions in your councils and your districts too. So are you interested? How can we help? And when should we get started? Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a question? I'm aware of the homelessness issue in Rotorua and Tauranga, not so much in James, but I'm quite interested to hear from the other mayors the extent of homelessness in those sub-regions, because I don't know.
I can't give you facts and figures right now, but there are certainly people who are homeless. It tends to be people who are parked up in a freedom camping spot, extended periods of time, or in a tent at the back of a reserve kind of situation, rather than in shop fronts and things which you might get in Tauranga or Rotorua. But so that's definitely including in homeless. So it is an issue. I think what I was going to say was, totally happy to look at the strategy and what can be done. I'm just conscious that, government's told us to stick to our knitting and think about rates capping, and then this is a kind of another social welfare type point, and whether that is something that we can really move forward with at this time. But I mean, I'd love to do it, but is that something we want to be thinking about at the moment?
Yep. totally agree, and different districts may have different priorities on this as well. I will say though, is what we've found is because I've brought in all the government agencies, it's also holding them to account. So they are funded and they are supposed to deliver outcomes. And if we're finding that people are becoming homeless because they've gone from, as an example, Department of Corrections, then they're released from prison, there's no mandate or resource for them to follow up. And then there's a gap where they become homeless before they end up with MSD or Ministry of Housing or Urban Development, Kainga Order, etc. So I do agree, it's not our role to deal with the social or the health aspect, but we could have a role in bringing them together and sharing that information. But there will be different priorities for different districts. We've got Mayor Tunui followed by Mayor Tant Josh.
Sorry, kia ora. Similar to Rotorua Chair, much of the homelessness in our community was driven by the emergency housing and the relocation of whānau from other rohe coming into our community. So you didn't have those local links for those whānau who were housed in that way, albeit temporarily. And there wasn't a continuum of care shifting from that immediate response of emergency through to, I don't know, temporary, whatever that may look like, into permanency and then out into the private sector. I'm not sure that continuum of care was well considered. For me, similar to Mayor Tapsell, we have been linked with the Public Commission, Ezra Schuster, sorry, I should take more note of roles, thank you, Public Service Commission Office around the role that central government agency plays in that, because the care that's required for broken hearts and broken minds of our whānau who often land in that position, it's labour intensive, it takes a specialist level of care to be able to find out really it's symptom versus cause. Often the symptom is addressed, but actually it's the root cause that we need some specialist care for our whānau. For our local whānau, because Gawiro is so small, you will know them on a first name basis, and there's just a long intergenerational whānau conversation that needs a little bit of love and repair. But that was, in terms of the homelessness, our tūwharetoa hauora at home are taking a lead in that space, and our role is to facilitate and bring to the table the government agencies that should be there. Can I just say, Chair, I am concerned with the super agency thinking of transport, environment and MHUD, and whether that dilutes the emphasis and focus on the housing component of that. But perhaps Minister Bishop knows more than I about the intent of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Tant Josh.
Thank you. First of all, I'll say I'm really supportive of the idea of a Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness, and I think announcing it at the LGNZ in Rotorua and inviting councillors to be part, I think it's a good idea. It's a growing issue for us in Whakatane. We're basically picking up the failure of central government around this issue. And once again, maybe government's telling us to stick to our knitting, but at the same time, we're increasingly having to pick up their failure because who else is going to? And we are the civic leadership in our communities. So we're in a difficult position. But I do agree it doesn't have to take up a lot of our resources. It may be around coordination, collaboration, facilitation, and things like that. I'm aware that there's a few different kinds of homelessness. So in Whakatane, we have street people who are in the doorways, out the back, often with severe mental health and addiction issues, and they are very difficult to help for a range of reasons. And so making sure that they're getting access to the support they need is something, and we have people on our council who's a lot of their time is spent dealing with these kind of people. Then we have homelessness itself, which is much harder to count. We can count kind of the street people, but it's much harder to count homelessness because we've got people living in garages, couch surfing, and all these range of things. And there's two different causes as well, because you've got people who maybe are incapable of maintaining a house or a dwelling, and maybe don't want to for a range of reasons. They don't want to be in a house, and maybe the responsibilities of managing that is too much for them. And then you've got people who desperately want a house, are holding down jobs, got families, kids going to school, and they're living in a car because there's just no housing available. And noting that the government has cut climate water funding, and so some of the stuff that was coming online is no longer coming online in our communities. And I don't know how people hold down a life doing that and going to the swimming pool to shower, trying to maintain a semblance of normality when this is their living condition. So it's very difficult. It's a growing concern in our communities. A number of my councillors are very concerned about it and want to help. A number of our business people are very concerned about it, but don't want to take a punitive approach. They want to help, but they recognise these are systemic issues that are maybe outside of council's control. But nevertheless, I think we do have a role in there. As I said, coordinated voice, pushing agencies, I think actually holding the central government agencies to account and demanding that they do their job in our communities, I think is a really important thing. And there's also opportunities to collaborate in our communities. We have Wairaki whānau mentoring in our community, and they are very keen to collaborate and already provide a lot of support in that area and are keen to do more. So I think there's a lot that we can do without it taking a lot of our budget. But sharing ideas, sharing problems, sharing solutions, and also being a really strong advocacy voice on behalf of homeless people to the government, I think it's a really good initiative. So, yeah, definitely support.
Thank you. Me Moore?
Yeah, you're doing great work there, Tanya. And just the thought of a 12-year-old feeling safer living on this street, to me, it's something really seriously wrong with our society. Don't even want to even think about what they have to go through for that to happen. I would be fully supportive. It's another thing again. This isn't part of council business, but it's what we do as mayors, is why we put our hand up. I would be fully supportive of doing something. And I think everyone's touched on stuff, but I think holding people to account, those in central government, they need to be held account. The move on orders, there's an obscene side of that to me. I know it's going to be nice to move people on so they can't be visible as we come up to an election, but move on to where? Really? It's like kicking down not making light of these situations, but it's like the ultimate kicking the can down the road to me.
Yeah, I'd just firstly like to thank Tanya and Rotorua for hosting a couple of our councillors this week. I think there is a lot of benefit in working together and being collaborative and learning from each other. So certainly support this. Agree with some of the comments around the table. This is not local government or our job at all, but unfortunately it affects our people greatly, and it is a significant issue. So if central government don't do their job and don't deal with it themselves, then we have to step in, and this is a great example to them as stick to your knitting. We're not going to be able to stick to our knitting if they don't pick up and do their part. So, I am encouraging of putting something together, working together, learning off each other, because it hopefully goes a little way to solving the problem. I agree around the move on orders. However, it does solve the problem for 24 hours if we have someone being completely disruptive, and unfortunately we've had plenty of examples of that in our city, and at the moment we don't have the power to move them on unless the police can find them doing something illegal. So it does not solve the problem. It kicks the can down the road, and absolutely we advocate that it doesn't solve the problem, and that is the key thing. Where do they go? You move them on, but where to? So that's, I guess, the challenge to government is that. But we do, I guess, support the fact that if someone is being disruptive and affecting our resident or one of our shops or businesses, that police will now have the power to actually shift that problem, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Thank you. Go back to me more in just a second. I do want to add to this conversation. I did speak about working with government agencies, but actually also our business community, our Chamber of Commerce, and they have been in the construction of, they have been in our desire to make our community safer, a really incredible partner in bringing together the businesses and actually understanding what are the key concerns, because there's a big difference between someone who's experiencing homelessness and someone who's acting in a disorderly, antisocial way, and they're not necessarily connected. So we also have to understand that there are human rights that people have to occupy the CBD if they wish. But when it starts causing the community safety concerns and having a economic impact as well to those businesses who we hear do struggle when there's disorder. I'll just leave it there. But me more.
Just look, I had a meeting yesterday with corrections regarding, transitional from prison, finding places for people to go to. There is nowhere, but all of us have got kaingaora properties in our districts that the government has instructed them to ditch. This is an example. Maybe they can give us one each, and we can actually fix their problem for us. But they need to fund it and give us some of that. So, and just with the move on order, May, I wasn't, aware there's an issue for the shopkeepers, but the police already have the powers to do that. It's called disorderly behaviour. They can move them on if it's causing a disorder. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. I've heard from you all that you're supportive of this, and so let's continue to work together to see how we can find better solutions in each of our communities across the region. So thank you very much, everyone. The only final item for today was the whiteboard session, which, as I mentioned, I propose that we conclude the meeting now, have our lunch, and then we'll be able to informally have the whiteboard session. And as mentioned, we'll make sure that we note the key points for the minutes to be made publicly available, and then also importantly for the chief executives in their discussion tomorrow. So once again, e tino honore tēnei ki te noho ki tēnei tūru. Thank you very much. It is a real honor to be here. And I've just got to say, every time I hear you guys talk, I just feel like getting teary-eyed because I'm like, wow, our region's in such good hands. And I can hear the care and the leadership that you are all providing in such uncertain times. So thank you very much, everyone. I'll close our hui with the karakia. Kia whakeiri ai te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turiki whakataha ai, kia turiki whakataha ai. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Lunch is available in the back.